Hey guys, before we get into this podcast episode, I just wanted to take a moment to introduce the person I'm interviewing in this episode, Rafi Evans. So we actually recorded this conversation back in December and we just got right into the conversation. I hadn't seen her in a while, so I started recording actually after the conversation started. So you guys are kind of coming in about 5 minutes into things, but just a little bit of background on Rafi. She talks about her experience taking the leap of faith from the University of Florida to moving out to Los Angeles, and now she's a social media manager as well as a curator of experiences for a number of TikTok stars and influencers. And Rafi really understands the landscape of digital content and video, as well as understanding Gen Z's role in social media right now. And she's just a great testament to what happens when you follow your dreams. So thanks so much for listening to this episode, and I hope you guys enjoy it.
Living in the Zoom age, you know? It's been a year of Zoom.
Which is wild. Especially when like I had Zoom before and I was like, oh, whatever. And now everything is on Zoom all the time. And if you don't know how to work it at this point, it's like, oh, what are you doing with your life?
You're done for if you don't know how to do it at this point.
So, I mean, and then we're in December. So we're this year. I'm like,
where did the year go?
It's crazy because where did it go? But also when I think about things that were happening in like January and February, I'm like, there's no way that was happening this year. Like,
right. No, it feels completely distant from like what I'm doing right now as well. Like, I'm like, I can't even remember what was going on at that time. Like my life feels so vastly different than January of this year. I'm like, oh, last year.
Because that's what it feels like. It feels like it was like last year. And it's just like, because the entire like flow of life was different.
Right. Like, oh, especially COVID. Like that like March, April, May block of time, just like it's the void. Like it doesn't exist. Nothing in that time frame like exists. Like I was just like the same day over and over, just like living through it over and over. And then all of a sudden I woke up and it was like August. I was like, oh, okay. This is different.
And it was also like having the expectation that like, oh, it's going to get back to normal this year. Like, oh, like October, like we're just going to go back outside and like we'll have stuff going on. And it's just like, once it hit early summer, it was like, this is it. Like,
no, as soon as like we first shut down when I was in Gainesville and like we first shut down the university for like 2 weeks, I was like, oh my God. So in 2 weeks, like we're all going to come back. Like that's what it's going to be. And then very quickly it was like, no, this is about to take a year of our lives until we have any sort of normalcy. And now it's like, all right, how much longer is it going to take? Because it's already getting close to that year now.
And so it's one of those things too where I feel like in the beginning it was like, oh, like coronavirus is like over there in Wuhan, like feel so sorry for them, like hopefully they get like, you know, humanitarian aid. Like I think people in the US were like really removed from it. I remember like going to grad school classes in Whitman and like the TV and stuff, we're talking about like stocks and how like it was affecting like the nation and then like of China, but then also to like the continent of Asia. So it was very much like oh, that's an over there thing. And then it was like slowly starting to creep in. People were like, oh, okay, like this is getting weird. And now
here we are.
Yeah. Literally.
No, it's insane. Like it's just also weird that we're living through this time. Like I felt like nothing in our lives had really like defined our generation other than like we were probably the youngest people remember like 9/11. Like that was the biggest like monumental, you know, event of my lifetime, which is like crazy. Well, I'm going to say, yeah, like at that level. And now it's just like, you blow that out the window. Like this is the craziest thing that's ever happened in our generation. And sorry, there's like a naked cat walking through here. She's like, oh, there's a screen. But no, it's hard. It's weird that it was hard to adjust to. And now it's weird that we've adjusted and now we're continuing to adjust. So now I'm like, okay, what are you going to throw at me next, huh? Like...
It's really created this, I feel like, flexibility that I also think is like why so many people are like kind of like just jumping into whatever it is that they kind of aspire to do, because it's just like, why not? Like, who would have thought that we'd be quarantined to our homes because of a global virus that they don't know how to contain and don't have a vaccine for, that's spread across the world in less than a year? Like, it's just like, it's something out of like a sci-fi novel. So it's just like, no, might as well start a YouTube channel.
We wrote this. No, it's literally like you could not have written a better time for creatives to like want to to create art, but also not feel like they can create art because there's so much going on in the world. So you're like, I remember early in quarantine, I was like, okay, we have this time, like use this time, be productive with this time. And I was like, the last thing I want to do right now is like figure out a strategy of how I'm going to approach this in a productive manner. And I almost like felt bad for feeling like that, because people were like, oh, I'm going to write scripts, or I'm going to like start these things, these channels, and I was like, I don't want to do anything. Like, I physically am incapable of doing anything more than my body allows me to do in these 4 like quarantined walls. Like I was going crazy, like looking at the walls. I literally wallpapered my wall one Sunday for like something else to look at that like wasn't beige. And I was like, I know that I need to use this time because it's like such a crazy opportunity to be able to document this time. And like, you know, like us as writers, like for me not to be writing down something from this would be like a disservice to myself. But I was like, in what way do I even want to capture what I'm living through right now? Like how am I going to look back on this and think about this period of time? Because so quickly I was like, I'm going to forget these like very minimal things that are happening in my life, because it's going to feel like none of this time's ever happened. It's not, unless I have something physical to show for it, it's going to feel as though none of this ever happened to me.
Yeah.
Which now I'm happy I have some things that like I have saved. I even have just like photos of when I was driving and the like stores first closed down. And I was like, I've never seen like window paintings that were like closed due to COVID or will reopen eventually. I'm like, that's the craziest signage you could ever see like outside of a store.
It's wild too, because like I started taking pictures, like because I was still like kind of traveling at the beginning, like late February, early March. So I had gone to Toronto, and it was like the next weekend they closed. I was like, got there just in time. And then I went to Boston to visit a friend, and it was just like certain things like people selling basically like public PPE like on the street, and like the little signs in the store, like in Walgreens, like please only take like what you need, like or you know, we're not allowing more than 2 of these. And kind of just like taking pictures that like are like encompass, like you said, like the time of like documenting what was this like and like what has this been like. Because when I think about like those historical pictures that kind of strike people, like when people look at like the tent villages from the Great Depression, or like that picture of like that man who randomly kissed that woman during World War II. And it's like, these are the images that kind of get stuck in people's minds that like identify a time. Like 50 years from now, like what is going to be the identifying factor of this time? And I think it's going to be a lot of those, like you said, like videos, pictures, like even, I mean, you know, the TikToks and all like the jokes that we made, but like that were.
Well, really- I mean, social has had its moment. Like social has had its day in the sun. Like anybody who didn't believe in the power of social like 8 months ago, like you'd be stupid brand wise, like personal wise, like familiar, like families are using social in a different way. Like individuals are just approaching digital, I feel like, because of this time so differently than they ever have. Like social movements. I mean, we can talk about like digital literally shaped this period of time because we were not physically allowed to be with anybody. So it's like, how do you create culture online? Like, well, people have been doing it. Now we're just seeing it mainstream so much because there's no other way to physically create culture with each other. You have to do it through like a digital network, which is like why I think like TikTok just blew up. And like why Twitter, I mean, Instagram, like we saw massive digital movements, because how else was word gonna transmit, and how else was like these events going to be documented? It was the only way to kind of prove things were happening to other people while you couldn't see them. I don't know. And I was like, yes, digital, like finally people get it. So that was like,
that's your thing. That's your space though. Like you're very much like in that and tapped in. And I think also too, just like verifying like the fact that people like wanted to showcase what they were doing day to day. They wanted to be like, this is how I'm homeschooling my kids. Or people also were like, I need resources. Like, how do I work and like keep my kids entertained? Or like, how can I cook for myself from home for the next 30 days because these restaurants are closed? Like, there were just so many immediate transitions and shifts that like a lot of people weren't prepared for. And I think beyond being like just a place for like relaxing, releasing, whatever, like fun, it was also a huge like educational moment for people.
Absolutely.
Oh, like I'm getting on TikTok. Like I think like Tabitha Brown, who like, you know, her daughter's like showing her how to make a TikTok, and then like comes out that she's the number 2 most viewed person on TikTok for the entire year, and just got on there in March. So it was, like you said, it was a big year. It's a huge year.
And like I feel like the only growth that happened, and in companies was on the digital front. Like so many people went through these mass unemployments because physically you can't be doing these jobs anymore. And then so much is now relying on these digital teams that have always traditionally been like one or two people. And now your entire company is working remote. You fully rely on social to like try to get your brand out there or try to make kind of money in any way, like no brick and mortar strategy, just like thrown out the window. And all of a sudden these digital strategists are like, this is our moment. And how horrible that that's like the circumstances. But like, I'm so thankful there were so many people that were like prepped to be able to do that.
Right.
I was like, I have no idea what's going on. Like, how are these people, how are these people handling?
And I think people realize the like quality, but also like the value of their social teams, because for so long, like social media managers have been like underpaid, overworked, and kind of like, oh yeah, just like make these posts, like, just post those videos. And then when they realize like, oh, you have now, you said 5 videos a week, like now we're posting 20 videos a week, like we want you captioning these, like the amount of effort and time and work that you're putting into keeping our brand afloat is like so much more than we realize. And
no, I hope all of them get a fat Christmas bonus, fat holiday bonus, because they kept like, those are the people that kept brands alive. Like
very much
and
so.
A lot. And what's sad is like, you can't blame those people for the brands that didn't get kept alive during this time. But it's like anybody who was able to stay above the water and like keep their head afloat, like shout out social channels, like social media managers were fully the people doing that. Like,
yeah,
I can't even imagine. And also just like, not only creating content pertaining to the fact that there's a global pandemic happening, but it's like, okay, Black Lives Matters happens, such a giant social response happening. You have one social media editor that's like drafting these kinds of things for your, like, who's talking to that person to like relay what the messaging of your entire company is in what could have been, when everybody's like Hawkeye's watching to make sure that everyone's putting out statements or how they're putting out statements. Like people are just like being checked for the first time ever. And so these social media accounts are like, these managers, I felt so bad. I was like, can you imagine having to draft that statement by yourself, or like not having any upper level management with you, like trying to figure out what the messaging is or how you're going to package it, or because it can look too produced or it can look underproduced or it's not authentic. It's just, you're not talking about the errors that you've made. It's just, I was saving on Instagram that whole day. I was like, every brand that came out with a statement, I was just saving them, because I'm like, we have the Notes app apology on one end, and then we have ones that look great. We have ones that look great that say nothing. I'm like, so many people haven't done it right.
I think like the email newsletters where it's like random email from some brand that sells socks, like, hey, we know what's going on. We see you, we hear you, and we value you. 10% off for BLM socks. And it's like, you didn't know what to do. So you just showed up with this email and you put it in, Substack or whatever. You put it in MailChimp and you got it out. Like, didn't ask anybody, just thought, here's this.
That was the right thing to do.
Yeah. Right. And it's just like, people are like, yeah, well, so it's just for tone deaf, or certain people putting their money here. And it also showed like how important like having that diversity on staff is. Like maybe if you had some more women, maybe if you had some more Black people, maybe if you had more people of color or Indigenous people, or just someone who doesn't exemplify people who technically aren't affected by this, you might be able to have a more tangible and non-reactive response to what's going on. So it was like you said, it was a huge year for social. And I think like just seeing the blow up of that space, and also the recognized value, but I'm interested to see how companies begin to really like price those jobs, like the salaries that they receive. I know for me, like I was finishing up grad school, and the initial salaries I was looking at, especially because of COVID, were really low. It was like, well, we actually want you to do 2 jobs, but we want to pay you for the price of one because we can't afford to pay you. And I was like, I can't afford to be working that hard from home to create these statements that you guys need and position you the way you need to be. And then you tell me that you're still not going to pay me for it. Like, this is not
right
even trade-off. And so I think that I'm really just interested to see how the next fiscal year, like, how are you guys responding to that? Like, knowing that social media managers, directors, content creators, like, these people are huge to the value of your business.
Well, yeah, I feel like finally now they're realizing that those are some of the most important jobs. Like, if you're not allocating like serious funds to like, or not even just budgeting like to freelance, if we have this very like not okay system of just having freelancers create like as content creators and not in-house, but that's a whole nother conversation. But like, if you're going to have that, like, pay people for their time. Like, they're making these kind of crazy decisions that are leveraging your brand and like ultimately deciding how the public perceives you. Like, maybe you should pay them for their time, or I don't know. I just feel like there are so many jobs that are so important that make so much more money than content creation, and that it has never made sense to me, because I just love content. Like, that has always been my hustle. But I'm like, I don't understand like how video editors don't make astronomical amounts of money the way that an engineer makes an astronomical amount of money. Like, virtually creating the same kind of system, just different infrastructures, but one's getting paid like a significantly larger amount than the other.
And let's not talk about how complicated that is. Like, some people are like they really get it the same way some engineers really get it. But I opened up like, Audition, and I was like, yeah, no, like this is not it. Like Premiere, all of it, no. I was like, I will pay somebody to do this because I'm not
right.
And it is too time and energy exhaustive to try and figure out how to do this. Like, that'll definitely like not be where I spend my time. And it's definitely, I think, a testament to the fact that like creative arts and talents are valuable. They are viable careers for people to go into. And this next generation, especially like Gen Z and like the generation after them, will definitely see, I think, a lot more jobs that are in that space, and then that are actually reflected as like respectable, honorable, like not like, you know, when you tell people like, oh, I want to be a content creator, I want to go out and like, you know, be a screenwriter, and people are like, why are you going to spend your time in college on that? You know,
I know. I'm like, people, I mean, obviously now I'm around a lot of like Gen Z TikTokers, content creators. And I'm like, I don't understand why anybody shades you ever, considering the amount of money you're making, the strategy that you literally have to create to be able to be successful in that career. I don't understand how anybody ever shades you for it. Like, you guys are the smartest people in your field. Clearly, you have the numbers and the audience to prove it. But yet, the mainstream public are like, oh, those TikTokers, they're just making dances, but I'm like, you get it because you're like a growth strategist, like too. It's like there's so much strategy and thought process that goes into the messaging behind who you're going to be on your social channels, how you're going to present yourself, how the way that you're going to interact with other people, like how are you going to build your community, like from this like kind of gift that you've been given, or like this audience that you've started to foster, and then seeing how those audiences translate into like CPG goods, like how that becomes monetized, because now you can sell those people who are in your audience, and you have to be strategic about what you sell them. Like, you can't sell out and just sell them everything that comes into your inbox, but how are you going to pick brands that align with yourself and like worth giving, like selling to your audience? Or how are you going to take that next step to kind of level up as a content creator? Like, how do you continue to push your content? So I think this year has opened up that space because there's been just an influx of users on social platforms. And like, I've watched content creation get better in the last 9 months than I think it has ever been, because people are realizing that we have the attention spans now, and people have the time to be dedicating to these kind of platforms, and whether they shade it or not, like, they're watching. So you might as well figure out a sustainable like way to continue making an income off of it. Like, I'm like so happy around these kids I'm around every day. I'm like, you're doing such smart things. And yeah, you do a couple dances, but there are things that are going on behind like the TikTok account that make them real, real money is like being generated from this. It's not like you have a million followers and you're not making any cash, and you could have way less than a million followers and be making a ton of cash. So it's just about the strategy in it. But it's been amazing to watch like the creative industries kind of both flourish in some way on digital, but also like traditional media like finally had a moment where they were like, this is not working. Like, traditional media hit the fan. Like, the way things have been working in traditional media has never made sense. And now I feel like it blew up in their face and they had to revisit it. And I could not be happier as a digital girl. So I'm like, thank God this has been my thing for so long, because I feel this year was monumental, and just moving it forward and continuing to move forward and watching the spaces that content creators are now allowed to like enter, like investment spaces. Like, since when were content creators even valued in like private investing? And now it's like these companies, their first rounds of investments or Series A's, like they're like, well, we want your money because it's valuable money and you have audiences that we want to tap into. Why not invest, in these companies? So I'm like, do you think I would have ever thought that in 2013, like watching YouTubers, like that was going to be where content creation was moving? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But I'm happy that that's what it's doing.
Right. And like just saying like next year, the predicted market value for influencers is $15 billion. So
yeah, it doesn't surprise me.
It's like the exponential increase of the value of the space, but then the fact that like 3 years ago, I feel like was when there was kind of like the influencer boom where you started to really see like everyone really kind of trying to be an influencer, and those people who are the most successful are the people who are like, making the hundreds of thousands of dollars like on brand campaigns now. But it's one of those things where there were so many naysayers, kind of like you said, and it's like now to see this industry grow to this size, and most likely will continue to grow. Like it'll probably be a burst at some point, but I don't think that it'll kind of fizzle. It'll probably just diversify. Mm-hmm. So seeing that iteration, especially coming from a place where like I was thinking about the other day, back when YouTube like first came out and it really kind of felt like MySpace a little bit, and people could like decorate their own page. Seeing like what it is now is like ridiculous considering the fact that it's only been 14 years. Like people like 14 years, but iteratively speaking, that's not that long to go from, so-and-so's like posting videos of them like dancing like in their house to like whatever music, to now holding like the home space for content for the biggest content creators we're seeing across like multi-platform channels.
It's so strange to me, like when I see someone that I work with, them having like a #1 trending video on YouTube. I'm like, millions of people are watching this. You are occupying the minds of so many people at this given time. And for obviously YouTube rewards that. So like for YouTube as a platform to see the value of those creators, to promote them. And there's like a lot of problems in the creator economy in general between like the creator platform relationship. But like in that sense, it is cool to see that when YouTube does reward like a creator for creating good content consistently, like trending videos will happen. And the more trending videos that happen, like obviously your audience grows. And it's like, it's amazing to me that these people who are just like, these ideas we have like in the middle of the night, like turn out to be #1 and 2 trending videos like 3 days later. That's such a, like an amazing thing for me to watch. And like to be on those teams to help produce kind of content like that. I mean, that's a dream come true for me. I've always wanted to do that. So I don't know, it's been an amazing journey to watch creators be able to do this and like to be a part of now some of the biggest ones and what they're able to put out, because they control what social is doing. They don't even realize how much influence they have until they tweet something, and then all of a sudden like all these gossip channels are on it, or these like, I'm like, you guys can't say anything without it being taken 100% seriously, and people assuming that they know what you're talking about without ever coming in contact with you. So it's amazing that how much they can leverage their audiences, and just they say anything and people will believe them, and they shape what's going on in the world. They shape trends. Like it's crazy to think that's what they are.
It's like the trust barometer is so high. And I think that people, especially if you're not in the digital space, like, if you're like, oh, I'm not really tech savvy, like, a lot of people's parents are not really on my phone like that, like whatever. It's like, what's going on? But then when I see like certain influencers be like specifically, I've had eczema my entire life. Like my dermatologist is like, use CeraVe, been using CeraVe. But the TikTokers have now made it virtually impossible for me to go to Target, CVS, wherever, and go get the regular skin products that have been available for years and are like, oh my gosh, CeraVe. And I'm like, it's been out forever, like since you were like, but now it's like this boom of like click of people being like, oh, this is an opulent skincare or whatever, like this is a chemical sunscreen, this is a physical, like, and people, I'm thinking like, I'm an expert in this, but also too, like to actually control the way that people are spending their money, controlling what brands are putting out and how brands are being received. And then controlling the like review process too. Like, okay, like I'm not going to buy.
Oh yeah.
Says that it's good, or like if they say that these products are better than those, you'll notice like a shift in the response to different products. And it's just so interesting because it's also like the people who are shaping this economy are like 18. You know what I mean?
No,
like
100%.
They're cute.
I follow like one of my favorite accounts is Skincare by Hiram, and like Hiram literally reviews people's skincares all the time, and I'm like, that man probably put Mario Badescu out of business. Like he said one time that rose water was not it for your face, and all of a sudden, like from 2011 to I think 2015, everyone told us to spray Mario Badescu on our face.
Yeah.
Like I don't know,
rose water and everything else.
Rose water. Everybody was like rose water, rose water. And Mario now, like Hiram's like, no, don't put Mario Badescu on your face. And I'm like, what? Like for years, that's all people told me to do. But now the review process has become, okay, literally watch me do my routine and tell me what I'm doing wrong. Tell me what products I'm using. And somebody will literally tell you that's not good for your skin. Like that has this chemical in it, has this. And all of a sudden that person's not going to buy those products anymore. Like,
yeah.
The amount of influence that like he holds also just as like the skincare expert, crazy. But like there are influencers in different spaces that do that. He's not even a gatekeeper, I would say, but he's just like so educational to his audience and like so authentic of a creator as well that celebrities want him to tell them like, okay, what products am I using that are wrong? I'm like, you hold so much power. You hold so much power. I'm like waiting for him to come out with his line. Like that can be the only next step, right? Like
I mean, especially when like James Charles, like you look at people who are like younger, like here's my Too Faced line, and that's just like cosmetics. Like we have clothes, shoes, like hypebeast gear. There's so many pockets where people can kind of like put their foot in the door and like just develop a level of expertise around this niche area. And then there's a community,
right?
There's so many there's a culture to everything, and it's not just racial. And I think that brands are just now coming into that. Like, but even furthermore, I think the ability for people to control like the way that they receive capital and the way that they control like the socio-political space based on reviews, TikToks, Reels, Instagram videos, stories is monumental in how we think about our individual level of influence as people and like the power that we have to create this reality.
Right. Right. Like a lot of what I do now, I help out with like an energy drink company that was started by two of the influencers that I work with. And we value like that user generated content that like relates to the energy drink. It's so valuable. It's so valuable because it's not only like it's real people reviewing product. They're reviewing product onto their own social channels and their own audiences and talking hopefully positively about their experience using it. So it's like, thank you for the free advertising. Like we didn't realize that people would do that, but sure, like go off. And whenever they do well, we always contact them and start like a personal relationship with them because clearly they're buying the product and now they support the product because they've told people they support the product. So it's like, all right, how do we foster this relationship where you've clearly done something for us and we're very thankful for that. And you've leveraged your own audience to go buy this product that we never asked you to do. So it's like, so much can come from that kind of world of just user generated content on social. And it's like converting into real users buying product. So I'm like, why wouldn't you feed into that? Like, why wouldn't you love that? And it's amazing because I think what creators have such an interesting leveraging point in their own space is they're the only ones that are allowed to do everything. Creators can talk about skincare, they can talk about clothing, they can talk about music, they can do so many different things because it's themselves as the like what you're buying into instead of I only care about this person's clothing brand. I only care about this person's energy drink. Like the modern day creator is only successful if they have the ability to wear 25 different hats. Like you cannot be just good in one lane anymore, which is weird because I feel like all we were ever taught was, like either be an expert at one thing or, like make yourself a jack of all trades. And there's a lot of competition that goes on in those spaces and those different beliefs. And it's like, I always pride myself on being somebody who like knows how to do a lot of different things. And I had always been my problem because I was like, well, I can kind of do this. I can kind of do that. I can kind of do this, but I'm not like an expert in one thing, or at least I didn't think so. But now I'm starting to think that I'm an expert in digital, but I'm going to give myself that. But but like people, thank you. But now I'm like, thank God, like these creators, imagine if you were just good at one thing and people think that like, oh, TikTok dances are talent or whatever, but it's like, no, there's so much more going on behind that than people give them the credit to realize. And yeah, they're 18 years old. So of course, like mistakes are made. You're 18, but if I had 100 million people watching me at 18, odds are like I'd probably be making public mistakes too. So right. I don't know. It's a crazy world. It is that's a whole, they have so much power, and watching like mainstream traditional media interact with them now has been so exciting. Mm-hmm. And I watch like gossip channels talk about like TikTok creators, and I'm like, oh yes, like they're the new like young Hollywood. And that's such a strange realization because it makes real money.
Right.
But yeah.
That's like,
sorry, I could go on about creators forever.
I know. I mean, but it's a nerdy conversation, but it's also just, I think, so interesting because it's one of those conversations that it's hard sometimes for people to understand when they're not. And sometimes it's the age group, sometimes it's just the industry. And like what I'm always trying to explain to people is like, I am interested in media, but I'm interested in the business of this all. Like some people right. like they're like, okay, I want to be a movie star or whatever. Like, and that's fine. Like not knocking that. But when you break down the business of this thing, it gets really interesting very quickly. And there's so much that's happening so quickly on the back end of it that right. like if you stop paying attention for a little minute, you're going to be behind. So it's just,
you have to be plugged in all the time.
And so it's like to be able to have conversations where people are like, oh, like I see all these things happening, and like thematically I can piece them together. But there's also, you know, this huge potential for a number of things that happen that we don't really know yet. And so it's like, as much as we're like kind of frontiering this new space, we're exploring this new area that's like, oh my gosh, like couldn't even have imagined this. It's like, right. This is just the tip of the iceberg in comparison to like what this is about to become as this generation of content creators grows older, grows more influence, grows more capital, and becomes, you know, the leaders of their own households, becomes, you know, the head of their own families. And as we have that generational turnover, what does this mean when like we're 40 and this has been our normal for 20 years versus like when like working the same job every day and just kind of being on one lane as our parents normal. So I'm just really interested to see how it continues to progress and everything.
That's what I'm excited for, because I would love to be in it as it continues to grow. And like, you know, eventually it's hard to be like an advisor in this space because it's so like new, and everything about it is like based around youth. And, you know, how are you influencing youth when youth is the one creating the product? They're the one creating the culture. So it's like, who am I to tell these people what I think or how I would advise them? So I try to like approach it with humanity and almost like approach it not as like a content conversation, strategy conversation, right. but almost like a growth as an individual, because they're growing up on screen, and you have no idea where this is going to be in 10 years. Like no idea where this is going to be in 10 years. Like, is it going to be generational wealth that was fostered during this time? Is it going to be a long-standing kind of business model? Like, we've seen content creators make a ton of money, and then, you know, irrelevancy hits and, you know, they don't make money anymore. So like, how do you create strategy for like elongated periods of time? Or how do you continue to switch up your content so that you are sustainable for longer than your 15 seconds of fame, you know? So it's finding that, like, first of all, it matters, I think, who the creator is and what their passions are, because I think there are a lot of people who, you know, get a lot of followers that like their dream is not to do that. But it also, like, now it's become legitimized enough where that can be a career. And I don't understand why there's so much hate around that being a career, because you know what? I would do it too. Like, but I think now more than ever, you can't like job shame anyone into how they're making any sort of income. Like say what you want, know your worth. If you're making money and doing things that you're like happy doing, then who are you to tell me that what I'm doing isn't important in any way? So, and I tell that to anybody who's like, oh, you're around, you know, 19-year-old TikTokers all day. I'm like, yeah, and those TikTokers have more of a voice and use it every single day than like anyone I surround myself with. And they vulnerable and put themselves out there into those spaces. So, and clearly it's working for them. Right. So
yeah, it's also like building a ton of skills, like for you as you know, continue to like manage the background space. Like, I was watching your story and I saw like swipe up, and I was like, swipe up. Like, it's like, when did she get to So like I like go to her and I was like, when did she get 25,500 followers? So then I was like, I remember like when you like made that announcement to move to LA, and it's so funny because like that's what I had initially like written all my questions about, but like of course here we are nerding out. But like when you're like,
No,
hey,
you can ask me your questions in a
no,
minute.
it's fine.
We've been like
literally, I mean, this has been this since writing 105. So like
I know, but this is like
know?
it's funny that like now I'm actually in a spot where I can talk about this, you know, like
literally going from that presentation on like Little Michaela, like in like what was it, trend spotting? That's junior?
No, junior year.
I was
junior
like
spring. When were you abroad?
I was broad junior spring. I think it was senior fall because it was the one that was like at night from 5 to 8. Was it that one?
It was a class I did not want to be in. I'll tell you that.
I just remember like it was like we had that group project and you and I were like, okay, we're gonna work together. But it was like find 2 other people and you're like, okay. So
no, Little Michaela, you know, me talking about I dressed up as Little Michaela like in college for Halloween. And I remember people being like, who are you? And I was like, that's good. It's good that you don't know who I am. But I'm like, I've always nerded out about this. Like we've been the only two having this conversation for years.
For 5 years now. So it's just like the fact that it's coming to fruition is so interesting. So it's like I saw when you're moving out to LA and I was like, oh, like that's dope. Like definitely think this is her space. Like for the longest, I remember like us being in class, like Rafi's not really from Florida, like at all, doesn't give off Florida vibes. Like and then
oh my god, no.
Like I remember us making like a Twitter poll, like, is she from Austin? Is she from, Colorado? Like
people do think I'm from Austin. People do think I'm from Austin. I get that a lot.
Really not like Florida at all. So then I was like, okay, cool, in LA, like creative vibes. But then just kind of seeing like between you moved, because you moved this year, right?
Yeah, I moved in August.
Okay.
Yeah. So let me like walk you through that. So I was in Gainesville. I was working at the University of Florida, great job, right out of college. Like one of those on paper, perfect, like the benefits package, the retirement package, like I couldn't complain. Like any 23-year-old who's living on their own, able to pay all their bills. Like I had no complaints about that, but it was, and my parents were like thrilled. I was like 2 hours away from home. Like could not have been a better situation for anyone but me. Like, of course, I was the one that would be like unhappy with that, So I got there and it was just like, I thought higher education was it for me because I had so many positive experiences in higher education and like what I was involved in college that it made sense for me to want to be in that kind of an atmosphere and like to be around college age students because there is a piece of me that's very like mentorship based and I like really pride myself on that. So I was like, well, what's a place that I can go where I can make that same level of impact? And I was like, okay, college makes sense. So I went and very quickly realized that like, it was not exactly a perfect fit for me, but I was so content with like everything else that it gave me that I was like, okay, maybe I'll just ride it out. And at that time, I started to see like the big content house like boom happening out here. I was really tapped into TikTok, really tapped into like Instagram, I've always just kind of kept up like in the influencer space. I really got into like reading influencer like articles. I subscribed to a bunch of like email newsletters. I just kind of like made it my thing to know absolutely everything that was coming out of the influencer space. And I started like just trying to network with people who I knew would be good people to know that existed in my Syracuse circle and whatnot. So it ended up that I like had a phone call with a friend who worked for a digital talent agency out here. And we had a call in February and she was like, it sounds like you actually like what this is. Why don't you just send me, your stuff and I'll pass it along if, the time ever comes where the right job comes along. And I was like, you know what? It doesn't hurt to have whatever. Went along my merry business for months. And then in July, like the end of July, I got a cold email from the CEO of a company who represents a lot of the influencers that I worked with, like, because he was just assisting in the hiring process. And he was like, hey, we'd like came across your stuff. You're being considered. Like, can we hop on a call? And I had no idea what the job was. I had no idea what to expect of it. I literally got on the phone because I recognized the CEO's name. And obviously I was going to take advantage of that situation. So I was like, if anything, I get 15 minutes on the phone with this guy, make a good impression. Like maybe in a year when I'm done and I'm ready to leave, like I'll leave. because also a piece of me was so focused on I have to be here for a year for it to look like I did my job here and I didn't, you know, quit early or, and I was so nervous. Also, like leaving your first job is terrifying. Like it's the scariest thing I've ever done. And I remember being like trying just so avoidant in that process of not trying to like rock the boat too much or like stir up my life. And then it ended up that the situation was just like too perfect, like so right up my alley, assisting creators in a way that I never thought I would get to. And not even on a like, not even like on an entry level, but like on the major league level of like content creators and people that I watched and I respected and people I knew a lot about that, you know, could use my help and someone like me around them. So I was just like, by the grace of the universe, like this opportunity has presented itself to me. I would be so dumb to say no to it. Like, I have to go. And it worked out that one of my best friends from college was looking for a roommate out here. I had somewhere to live, like, had a job before ever getting on a plane. Like, all I had to do was, you know, quit my Gainesville job and then like get out here and let's go. And on top of all of that happening, we're in the middle of a global pandemic. Like I'm leaving remote work to come out here to be like around these people and like creating content in real life. And there was nothing more than I wanted out of my life than for every single day to feel different, because so much of quarantine to me felt like I was living the same day over and over and over again, that like I lost that aspect of life where I was like excited for new days because they would have presented me with new experiences. Mm-hmm. And like the writer in me is like, I feel like my purpose in life is to have like lived experiences to be able to write about later, like just like line them up for the memoir. What?
Like literally like there's the memoir, but then I just feel like the same way they had like Little Fires Everywhere and it was like developed into a series, like I was like, I really see like that kind of book like coming out of you that like gets developed into like some kind of Hulu series where like you love and hate the characters, because like that's definitely like that's your thing. Like that's one thing that I'm never not worried about. I'm just waiting for the book. So
you know, that makes me so excited because I'm so excited for the day that yours comes out too. But it was like even Thesis, like I needed it, everything happened exactly the way I needed to. Like Thesis, I was able to write the stories I needed to write to get them out of me. And then Gainesville was like such an important time for me to figure out my personal branding, figure out what my goals were, figure out what my strategies and like what I was able to bring to the table, because I was still in that, like, I can hold so many different plates, but I don't know which ones I'm good at holding at this point. Mm-hmm. So it was like, I know that I bring value because I have the ability to communicate very effectively. I am an effective problem solver. And like, if I get into an arena where there are people who don't like to problem solve and I'm the one who gets to problem solve, like that's the win for me, because nothing brings me joy like that. So I was like, cool, I have the ability to assist in this realm that I've always wanted to be in. And I have the ability to do jobs that I've always been able to do. And like one of my affirmations for 2020 prior to knowing any of this was like, you were capable of doing any job you deem worthy of your time. So as I just like kept saying that to myself every day. I still say that to myself because there are aspects of my job that I'm like, you are capable of literally doing anything. It's just like a matter of, can I figure this out? Can I problem solve it? And I never thought that affirmation would ever relate to like what I'm doing now. I was just saying that to myself in Gainesville because I was like, I need to get through every day. I just like there needs to be something that carries me through this. And now it relates more than it ever did there. So it's literally the craziest thing in the world. So then I packed up my whole life and moved out here in the middle of August. And now I've been here for 5 months? And I have grown effectively in all figures of the word. So
that is awesome. That is so awesome.
Yeah, it's very like dream come true.
Yeah, and that definitely, I mean, it lends to like what this is. Like I had called this like perspective. I don't know, like I'm gonna change the title, but like I said, like I just think there's so many people who are like going after like those things, and like the signs are there, like, hey, like come step into your destiny, like come walk towards
right.
This is purpose for you, and just being able to like have your ear attuned enough to be like, you know what, let me take this step, like, and seeing how much that like benefits you, and it benefits also to like the future vision for yourself. Because I feel like it's something that clicks, right. Like once you do that big thing the first time, you're like, I can do this again. Like when you said like, you know, I'm capable of doing anything. You just have to pretty much figure out how to do it. And then it's like, well,
Right.
like, I did this once. I can do this twice. Like, and then you do it twice.
I'm
actually good at this.
I was so scared to leave my first job. Like that's something that I don't think anybody had ever talked to me about. Like it had never been something like a conversation I had had with peers, because like we're all so young. Most of us are still in our, you know, like entry level jobs. So no one really knew or told me how to navigate that in any way. And like I know that one of my struggles is like I have a difficulty talking to authority when it comes to like certain matters like that. Like I'll avoid that until the end of time. But I remember being like, I need to move tomorrow. I need to have this conversation now, and like just swallowing that like horrible feeling inside of it's going to go so negatively. And also like I'm a planner, like I had prepped A, B, and C plans for any way that anybody could have reacted, you know, and just like tried to approach the entire thing like it was like I was running a day of show. Like I approached the entire thing like I was running a production, and like these were the steps that things needed to happen in. And at the end of it, I was going to be in LA doing my job. Mm-hmm. So everything I needed to accomplish prior to that happened for a reason for me to get to this point. But it's like the world works in such mysterious ways. Like I think I needed to be in Gainesville, like to figure out, you know, myself a little bit better, you know, have that time to be alone, like in quarantine by myself. Like that was such a humbling experience of my life. Like never had anything like that. And then to be out here living such a different paced life than I was living there, it almost felt good to have that break before gearing up, knowing that my life is going to be a lot like this. And like this has exceeded all of my expectations. I had no idea what my day-to-day would be like, but getting on that flight was terrifying. And I think so many people had told me it was impossible to like get a job in LA without being here first. And I remember telling people like the only way I'm ever moving is if I have a job before I move. And I mean, well, it's just not practical for so many people. And I'm one of those people. So I'm like, I'm just not privileged enough to like quit my job on a whim. And like people can do that and good for them. But like I was just not part of that group. So I was like, if I ever move to LA, it'll be because an opportunity presented itself that I could not pass up, and that the job would be waiting there when I got there. And you know what? Everyone else was wrong, and I got it exactly the way that I wanted to. So it is possible.
Right. Which also moral of the story is like your journey is your journey and other people's journey is their journey. And like while people can have wise perspectives like based in common sense and logic, like there's also just like the unique nature of like individuality that like people have, and it allows them to kind of follow their own path and kind of just like walk to their own rhythm, even when it's not part of the regular, you know, norm of everybody else.
Right. I was like, yeah, I've also been treating my Instagram like I've been an influencer for literally the last 8 years of my life. Like with 100 followers, I was posting the same way. So like, don't try to tell me anything different than what I'm
gonna say.
Now.
Like
I got that swipe up feature and I forgot how to act. So, you know,
I was like, I was like, oh, okay. And then I was like, oh, okay. Like, because I've been like seeing you like do like really cool stuff, but I was just like, this is Rafi, like super creative all the time. Like you never kind of know what's next. Cool. But then it was just like, you know, kind of as I, you know, kept following, I was like, this is awesome.
No, it's literally everything I've ever wanted. Like I have no complaints, and I feel so lucky that that's like what I'm at right now. Mm-hmm. Considering so many people are just not in that space remotely. But also like the flip side of that coin is I've always given this community and this kind of like landscape a chance. And I think there are so many talented people that if they entered this space would be extremely successful, but it's their own bias against like wanting to work with these people and or believing that it's a legitimate career. And like, yeah, I order, you know, 8 tons of like fake snow in the middle of LA. And you know what? I have a great time doing it. And, you know, content is being created. And if you can't see the value in like being a coordinator for something like that, like, why wouldn't you want that to be your job? Like, do you want to sit at a desk from 8 to 5? Like I didn't. So I'm learning that like I was so much better in the field than I ever was behind a desk. One of the smartest lessons I learned about myself, because I was doing things because I was in competition with others and with other people and seeing the way that they were doing things. And I was like, well, I can be better than them at this thing, realizing that that was not where my like true power was coming from anyway. And that's why I was not up to par with what their standards were. And I was like, why am I not as successful as these people? And I'm like, because you're not doing anything that these people, like, you're not doing what you want to be doing. You're just copying all of these other people. But when all of these people now see what I'm doing, they're like, how do I get to do that? And I'm like, well, this was meant for me. So sorry I spent so long trying to be you.
Right. And that's what I'm saying. Just like there's so much power in being authentic to yourself and your own story and your own journey. And I recognize that I have like 5 minutes left. So with that,
I'm in no rush.
I know I like backed up my schedule. But I want to know, like, if you just had to sum up like the last year in like one word, what word would you use and why? And then any lasting advice.
I would say the last year of my life has been humbling.
Okay.
When I think of last year at this time, I was literally like in my childhood bedroom, unemployed, recovering from surgery, like literally in my bed, in my bag, just in the worst, like in the worst state of mind regarding where my future was going. And I had to do so much personal growth to be able to get to a point to search for the career that I wanted. And I was so career oriented to the point where it hurt me. Like I was so geared and focused on what I could create and what I could produce and, the kind of person that I could be, that I based around my career, that I didn't put any value into my own personal health and in my own, just like my own journey outside of career. And it was so humbling for the universe to be like, no, you need to figure out everything else happening in your life prior to us, like, putting these opportunities in front of you that line up for your career. Like you need to focus on everything else because you've spent the last 4 years only focusing on your career. And so much of my life has been about my career because I want my life to be about my career. But I had really, stopped focusing on myself as a person and, my own health to the point where it was like, it was hurting me. So it's so humbling to look at where I was and, the personal growth that I've had, even in those first like 8 months in Gainesville. Like I learned so much about myself, so much about what I was good at and what I wasn't, what I wanted out of a job, what I didn't, like how to work with difficult people, how to even navigate just like corporate culture, and like how I didn't want to be a part of that, and how I valued the creativity in my own life so much more than I valued like my ability to do an Excel sheet, like just because you can do them doesn't mean that that's the route you're supposed to take. So I've had this like what I call the full send mentality. Like once you're in it, like once you're a step in, you might as well like stand all the way in. You might as well just completely send it and just go for it. And to go from a place where I was like so humbled by everything around me to the point where I had to just like literally jump and get on a flight and go. And the like friends of mine kept telling me like, everyone does it. Everyone gets on the flight. Everyone gets here and they figure it out. Like, that's just what it is. That's just what you have to do. Like, once you do it, you'll feel better. If you don't get on the flight, you're never gonna forgive yourself if you don't get on the flight, because you will have never known what could have been.
Right.
And that chance of me like missing out, like that fear of literally like the FOMO of what my life could be got me on the flight. Like that was the sole thing. I was like, I'm going to be so mad if in 5 months I look at the girl who took my job and not me. And I'm like, look at her life, like I would be so mad. I would be so mad. So you roll the dice, and sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. But I've been very, very fortunate to like be one of the few people this year that have really had a good year and grown a lot, considering all of the other extraneous factors that are happening in the world right now. So I'm going to go with, that's my last piece of advice is just like send it. Like obviously be practical about what you're doing and like formulate plans A through Z of what's the best way to execute what's going on. But like always believe in yourself. I'm like such a practical thinker, and that's where my creativity hits a wall and then practicality comes in.
Yep.
And sometimes my creativity falls nature to that practical side of me. But then the logical piece of me always knows that like it's there for a reason. Like I need to think through things before I do them. So you can't be irresponsible about sending things. Like you can't be irresponsible about how you go about doing them. But like if you figured it out, might as well do it. Like you spend all the time figuring it out anyway. So, and the worst that happens, you just figure out a new plan. Like if LA hadn't worked for me, I was literally like, if a month in I hate it, I fly back home and I'm at square one and we do it all over again. Like no decision is like the worst decision of your life. You can't ruin your own life because it's only one decision. I had a lot of really good people in my ear also while I was like panic stricken trying to decide if I was going to do this. Like I had a lot of good advice coming to me because I was so ready to not get on the plane. I was so nervous. I was like, am I ruining my own life by doing this? I'm going into something I have no idea what's going on. And you know what? It either is going to really work or it's not. And it worked. So that's where I'm at with it. Hopefully that answers your question.
It did.